Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Heidi Rosendell. We warmly welcome the family of Private Henry Thomas Lyde, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Henry Thomas Lyde, who died while fighting in France during the First World War. Henry Lyde was born in the Sydney suburb of Campsie in June 1900, the son of Jessie and Henry Lyde. He grew up in Campsie and attended Canterbury Superior Public School. Having taken night classes in carpentry, he began apprenticeship as a railway carriage builder when he left school. He was also a member of the local senior cadets. After war was announced, Henry was keen to join the army, so keen that he lied about his age in order to enlist. When he enlisted in March 1917, he gave his age as 18 years and 1 month, when in fact he was only 16 years old. Initially allotted to the 30th Battalion, he was transferred to the 33rd Battalion before setting sail from Sydney aboard the transport ship Marathon. Arriving in England in July 1917, Henry spent 6 months training at camps on the Salisbury Plain before embarking for France in February 1918. He joined the 33rd Battalion, which was stationed at Quarterpipe Camp in Belgium on the French border. At this time, the battalion was engaged in training as well as carrying out camp maintenance and repairs. Time was also set aside for recreational activities. The day after Henry arrived, his battalion's football team played a team from the 35th Battalion, losing 6-0. At the end of February, Henry and the 33rd Battalion moved to the front lines at Saint-Aul. Here the men worked repairing posts and trenches, sometimes coming under German artillery fire. Henry was attached to battalion headquarters as a scout, and during this time he patrolled the area in order to keep an eye on enemy movements. The weather was cold and snowfalls occasionally reduced visibility. After 2 weeks at the front, the 33rd Battalion was relieved and returned to Quarterpipe Camp. There they spent 2 weeks in training and preparing to return to the front. At the end of March, the battalion travelled by train to the French village of Villers-Bretonneux. At this time, the Germans were preparing what would be their final large-scale attack of the war, which became known as the German Spring Offensive. At Villers-Bretonneux in early April, the Germans began a heavy bombardment of the village and Australian lines. The men of the 33rd Battalion stationed themselves in the cellars of the ruined buildings and waited out the barrage. The Australian troops could see the German soldiers massing and expected an infantry charge any day. On the afternoon of the 14th of April 1918, Henry was on duty in a scouting party when a high explosive shell landed amongst the group. 1 man was killed and Henry was badly wounded. He was evacuated to the casualty clearing station where he died of his wounds. He was 17 years old. His body was buried at Aubigné British Ceremony, a small cemetery on the Somme River in France. His grieving parents and 7 siblings had the following poem printed in their local newspaper. Though dark my path and sad my lot, let me be still and murmur not, or breathe the prayer divinely taught, thy will be done. Henry Lyde is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Henry Thomas Lyde, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.